Today's guest is the creator of Honey Heist.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. All right, guys, I have an incredible interview today, so let's not waste any more time. Here it is. My guest today is a game designer and writer, Grant Howitt. Grant, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. It's my pleasure.
It's lovely in here. I love what you've done with the podcast. The throw pillows are delightful.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. How were you introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
So the year is 2000. So it's 22 years ago now. And I'd seen Dungeons and Dragons at a friend's house and thought, oh, can I swear on the show? Or is that something we don't do?
Usually
that's
not.
Fine. That's fine. That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
I thought I saw D&D at a nerd. I saw D&D at a friend's house when I was younger. I thought that seemed like some nerd stuff to me. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, it just didn't spark. But then I played a bit of Games Workshop. I started playing back in '97 with the release of Gorka Morka, which is basically Mad Max, but everyone's an orc. Mm-hmm. And I became aware of the idea that there were games you could play which weren't computer games, and they were fascinating to me. And then in 2000, I went to my one and only Games Day, which is a Games Workshop live event. I don't know what they call it now. We call it Warhammer Day or something. But Games Day was their big sort of international thing. It was held in Birmingham, and I was living in Carlisle at the time, which is in the north of England. And so because the coach to get to Manchester left at 5 a.m, what they did was all of the sort of spotty boys, myself included, slept over in the Games Workshop upstairs in just a series of smelly sleeping bags. But some of the boys were playing Vampire the Masquerade. They were playing they were playing Sabat, and so I would have been 2000. So I would have been 14 at the time, I think, and 13, 14. And these boys would have been about 17, 19 years old. So they're a bit older, a bit cooler, a bit more together, and they started playing Sabat, and I was absolutely blown away. It was looking back on it now, it was a fairly naff game of Sabat in that they were just sort of running around causing chaos, and they were getting up to no good and stealing blood packs from vans and like typical 18-year-old boy role-playing stuff. But I was absolutely amazed because they were just weaving the story together. They were just telling a story, and you could do whatever you liked, and there were rules for it. Mm-hmm. And even cooler, they were sent out of the shop to play outside because it wasn't an official Games Workshop game and they couldn't endorse it. like the real bad boys. Yeah. But then
RPG
because of
bad
that,
boys, yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like oh no, we're playing the cool vampire game, not this rubbish vampire game where you're good. Yeah. But I didn't get to see how it finished, but that kind of opened my eyes to the idea of role-playing games. And then this was thankfully, I discovered them at a time where I had internet, albeit dial-up. And so I started downloading free role-playing games and consuming them. And then I haven't really looked back since. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, nice. So what games did you kind of gravitate towards?
Well, you see, the thing is, when you limit yourself to free games, and I didn't know how to steal games, so it was just what I get. There's a website called John H. Kim or John Kim's Big List of Free RPGs, which I think is still online, and it had a wide variety of games which enthusiasts had written and posted for free. So we tried playing GURPS Basic. Some mates of mine and I made characters, and then we decided it was far too much to bother with, and so we stopped. We played a bit of Stick RPG. No, not Stick RPG, Rysis. But the one which really captured my imagination was a game called Zaibatsu, which was it was called post-Gibson-esque cyberpunk, and I didn't know what Gibson-esque meant at that point, but it was really cool and really slick. It had this kind of retro 70s style to it. It was hosted on an Angelfire website, and so because I was on dial-up internet, I just downloaded the entire game text into notepad files and read them offline. And I was absolutely really caught up by this. It was a really simple system. It was if you have the skill, roll 2d. So you roll d6. You roll 2d6. If you have the skill, on a 7, you succeed. Sorry. On a 5, you succeed. If you don't have the skill, on a 7, you succeed. So it just meant that that was basically all the rules of the game. And so it meant that I was able to quite quickly come up with something on the spur of the moment and invent things, which is what I really found exciting about role-playing games, was that inventiveness, that improvisation, that a player asks a question and you answer it, and then neither of you were expecting this to happen, but here we are. That very free form, that very scrappy kind of role-playing. And I think that would really inform a lot of my design as I went on. I took the systems behind Zaibatsu and repurposed them into something called Uncle Grant's Comedy Role-Playing Game. Because I used to call, I never called myself Uncle Grant. I just think UGC RPG looked good. I don't know, but I wrote it, and it's like a 19-page document. All of the pictures are just screenshots from Grand Theft Auto 3. There is an entire page dedicated to how cool marijuana is. There are too many rules for different kinds of guns. But I ended up sort of running this game in a way which I've never run a game before or since. But it was I suppose it was a West Marches style campaign. But we were at my high school, and then I would sit down on a lunchtime, and if I could get 2 or 3 people together or more, they would make characters and play. And then if they came back the next day, they carried on with the story. Otherwise, they just made a new character and joined in with the story as it went. And the story was, bad guys have taken over the school. Can you fight them off? And it was big and silly and freewheeling, and maybe it lasted for like 2.5 weeks, I think. But it was a lot of role playing. It was a lot of, like, in terms of like face to face actual role playing and making decisions. It was my first real experience of it, my first real experience of GMing, and it really captures something in me.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And, you are talking a lot about that, the idea of kind of making decisions and creating things on the fly. And you kind of alluded to it. That is kind of the spark that got you going, and, really kind of makes a game exciting to you if you can kind of dig in and kind of create things on the fly. Is that what you like?
Yeah, I think what I enjoy is a game which provides me with an interesting set of restrictions, and because I didn't come up playing Dungeons and Dragons or Shadowrun or any of these heavier games where there was a correct answer for everything. So in Dungeons and Dragons, if you kick a door, you can look up how many hit points that type of door has and the toughness and the hardness value, I think, of it. So you need to roll to hit the door and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in a lighter game, it's like, oh, make me a strength check. Okay, cool, the door's down.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I quite like about D&D, especially the more the 5th edition, is that it scales back to roll the dice and get about 10 really quite well. And if you just play it as roll the dice and get about 10, it feels broadly the same as normal D&D. So it's very cleverly designed in that way. But I like games which have this, like, that sense of here's 2/3 of the stuff you need, get out the door, and you will fill in the rest yourself. You will be able to improvise the answers yourself, because if we try to provide too much guidance, we end up taking some of that spark out and some of that excitement out of the game. And if you and looking at my one-page games, for example, which I think I'm probably most famous for, all of them are incredibly hard to run. Not like trying to run, I don't know, Exalted or something, because there's just so much maths to do. But they're hard because the GM is never allowed a moment to relax. In Dungeons and Dragons, if you're fighting 10 kobolds in a room, and you have 5 fighters on your side. You have 5 adventurers on your side. That fight is, aside from the fine details, you don't have to think during that fight. You just need to say, okay, the kobold runs towards you and hits you. Okay, roll to hit. Okay, take this many hit points. Oh, who's next in the initiative order? That's fine. Whereas if it's something like Honey Heist, about every 30 seconds you have to reimagine the world and then describe it to someone. And the more ability you give people to lean back into the rules, like knowing how thick a door is and how hard it is to break down, the easier a game can become to run, as long as you do the prep work first. And I think that was the thing which is most prevalent in my work, is that I've always been profoundly lazy when it comes to preparing for things. I really don't like doing it, except if it fascinates me. I think I have ADHD. I don't know. But I never liked studying. I never liked doing the reading. I always liked reading the précis, the short form of whatever it was I was doing, and then really aggressively asking questions in class. And that made it seem like I'd done the reading. But like, I mean, and my professors weren't idiots, but I like to imagine they were just happy someone was taking part, you know? like at least at that point I was doing the class. And so I've always struggled to do planning. And whenever I have done planning, it's never really worked out. It always falls flat. And so I wanted to make games where you are permitted and encouraged to come to the table with nothing. To come to the table with, here is a page of rules and an idea. What do we think about this? And then you start asking questions of the players. You start building things. My favorite part of any role-playing game campaign, in a more traditional sense, like, you know, we used to play 13th Age. And my favorite part of 13th Age was sitting down at the start and people made their characters. And we're like, okay, you've picked out your icons. So in 13th Age, you have icons, which are like the Diabolist and the High Druid and the Gold Worm, and these sort of major movers and shakers behind the scenes. And then the player characters pick which ones of those they're involved with. And so once everyone had these all picked out, we'd spend about 2 hours being like, right, okay, I've got 3 massive sheets of paper. We're going to write down what the campaign is, folks. What's the setting for this game? And we all just start bouncing off each other. And that really excites me. That session 0 really gets me going. And so anything which can take that level of free-form connectivity, that idea of spinning with ideas and working off each other and coming up with something entirely new and interesting. The longer a game can sustain that, the more excited I am to play.
Yeah. And of course you're talking to the guy who's written the No Prep Game Master, a small book about trying to take some of that work off game masters, because
reading a book, seems like coward's work.
Yes. Well, it's a really small book. That's
okay, fine.
Yeah, because usually when I would prep, I would get into traps, right? Because I was basically writing my own novel, basically, right? And I would expect the players to behave properly instead of going crazy. But when I didn't prep and reacted to them and, threw in some of my own ideas here and there, we usually had more fun. So that's what Absolutely. I have really kind of run with now, because to me, usually, if I'm at a table or on Zoom or wherever we're playing online now or whatever, we usually have 4 to 6 really incredibly creative people sitting around wanting to play this game. And it's like, why would I not tap into their creativity to help the story grow and expand into stuff that I couldn't have imagined?
One of the things which always used to rub me the wrong way about the World of Darkness is they used to call the GM the storyteller. And the idea of, I've met storytellers. I've been to music festivals and the like. I've hung out with crusty hippies, and storytelling is a thing, and it's really hard. I can't do it. It requires this tremendous level of audience, of being able to read your audience and being able to change and modify a story depending on what's going on. I like some light stage work, some singing, some dancing, doing different voices. You have to keep the pace going. It's really hard to be a good storyteller, and it's much easier to be a bad improviser, which works better as a GM. If you can just offload half the work or more to everyone else at the table. people are interested in something they have a hand in.
Yeah.
And I remember like discovering that at the age of, I would have been about 27, 28. And it really felt like an absolute revelation.
Yeah.
Like, oh, actually what you're enjoying is other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find too, I hear sometimes, people will say, oh, well, my players aren't really too engaged with my campaign. What should I do? And it's like, have them create stuff for it. Right. Ask them what's interesting about certain places. Right. As soon as you do that, they're there and ready to go. That's
some people I found are really quite scared of that.
Yeah, they are.
And I think there's a measure of performance anxiety there.
Yeah.
But also the sense of they want to pick the right thing, not just from sound good in front of their friends level, but also in terms of like, well, I want the best tactical advantage.
Yeah.
And it's like this isn't, if you're against the GM, this isn't a game with tactical advantage. If I want, I can fill your ass with bees. I'm the GM. I can do what I want. So don't try and outthink me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we're all friends here. We're all here together. We need to trust each other. I trust that you'll push the story in interesting directions, and you trust me that I have your best interests at heart. Yeah,
and I guess that is true. I guess I have heard of people and I've seen people post online and stuff and say, they're not comfortable creating some things. They want the game master, the dungeon master, to bring some of those, and I don't really understand those people too much, because they're probably very creative, and I guess maybe if it's just like you were saying, just kind of like that, a little bit of trepidation in front of people to kind of make up something, kind of put yourself out there, kind of thing. I don't know.
I think there's also the measure of, if you look at OS, I keep saying the measure a lot tonight. I think if you look at especially like the OSR scene, I read a fascinating blog which goes against everything we've just said. Forget the author, but she had like the example of the players open a drawer in like a clerk's office. What's in the drawer? And the best result is that you have written down what is in that drawer ahead of time.
Oh dear.
And the second best result, hear me out, the second best result is you have written down somewhere in the campaign prep, it is understood what is in drawers. So, right, okay, this world has pens, this world has, let's say, compasses and ink. This guy is a mathematician, and all of them. We've seen mathematicians before with their sacred symbol of the mathematics. So he's got that in his drawer as well. That's the second one. And the third best one is making it up. And if you make it up, well, go back and write something. And it fascinated me, because that's entirely not how I do games, and by the sound of it, not how you do it either.
No,
and not how most people do games. But I can see there's something quite attractive about the idea of turning up to my mate's house and just being like, right, I'm an elf ranger, whisk me away to a dreamland of magic.
Yeah.
And I don't have to come up with all I have to do is react, and all I have to do is explore this fascinating kingdom which this person is building for me. And then once that exists, I can then start making interesting role-playing choices there, because I'm not thinking on a performative level. I'm just thinking on a character level. And there's a different way of coming to that. But I definitely don't fit into that slot. I definitely just want to make things up.
Yeah. And I can, the last player there that you kind of described, I understand that, but part of me doesn't, because I want to create things anyway, right? Like I want to make stuff up.
Absolutely.
But two, I think that just puts way too much pressure on the dungeon master or the game master when a player is just like, feed me and I'll just react to you. I don't care for that too much.
It's all about expectations, and fundamentally, it's all about kink.
Yeah,
and if people like going into this situation and like being confused and trying to best the GM in some way, and pretending that it's like, it's a cruel GM and the GM will hurt and kill us. They enjoy that in some capacity, because they wouldn't come back otherwise. And they want that level of that level of control and confusion and immersion, I think.
Yeah. And then to pick up where you were talking about the drawer kind of example, my thought, is how do I know they're going to open the drawer? Right. So why would I write what's in the drawer if I don't know they're going to open it beforehand? Because then if I do, then I've wasted my time. Because then if they just say, if they're in the office or whatever, and they're just like, actually, we need to just go, and they run out the door, and I'm like, oh,
the drawer.
The drawer, the desk, there's a hidden door under the floor. Like, I made up all this stuff,
List of names in the phone book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're underlined and circled so you can find all these clues. What if they just decide to run out of the room and not search it or not open the drawer? So to me, that's when, it's just like, I have to tell them then to open the drawer, right? Like then to me, then the game is just breaking down. So like my best option is always to make up what's in the drawer on the spot or roll on a random table to find out what's in the drawer. Yeah. And then once you do that, I mean, I make books of random tables too. So once you roll on that random table and find what's in that drawer, then you can create, is it a clue? Is it not a clue? What are your players saying about that? Oh, we found a lighter.
I think random table also fits into that second category of like, has it been established in the world? Yeah. So if we have a thing of like, what's in a drawer, you could have a drawer table, you could have a possessions for a mathematician table or what have you. And the idea is that it's established and then you as a GM are entering more the role of a referee rather than the storyteller. But it's like, I suppose game master, I'd like a different word, I think, because it isn't referee and it isn't game master. Like it's I think facilitator. Yeah. It's probably it's such an unsexy word. Yeah. As well. Yeah. I'll be the facilitator for this evening. But it's
it sounds like you work for the CIA or something.
Yeah. Yeah. But at that point it's become exciting again.
Yeah. But, there you go.
It's like the idea of I'm nominally in charge. One of my players, I ran a Spire campaign a few years back before the big cough went around, and one of my players was playing a Bound, and the deal with the Bound is that they are a kind of Shinto Batman. They do they pray to the small gods in their armor and their knives and their ropes and their vigilantes. Living in the shantytown nailed to the side of the big city of Spire. And one of their core ability is called surprise infiltration. And it's at any point during the game, once per session, you just appear in a scene. And it can be like, you don't have to rationalize why you were there. You don't have to say, oh, well, I got into the window. No. If there's two NPCs talking to each other, right, no, okay, I'm in the rafters. Because you can just sneak into the narrative. And my player, she wrote that down saying, if you can convince Grant it works, that's fine. And then she stopped writing down the rules for her other abilities and just wrote and just underlined, if you can convince Grant it works, it's fine. And that is fundamentally the experience of playing a role-playing game.
Yeah.
If you can convince the GM it's fine, then it works. Don't you need to roll dice? There's this fascinating game called Dog Eat Dog. Have you heard of it?
No, I have not.
Oh my days. It's a game. It's not a game poem. It's a game. I think I was about to say it's unplayable. It's very playable. It's just hugely uncomfortable. Oh. In as much as you play the colonized people of an island and also the colonizers, and the player who earns the most real world money plays the colonizer. And right out of the gate, you're like, oh, okay. And then the way in which the mechanics of the game work is it has a fairly rudimentary dice system, and you play through the early stages of colonial invasion. If you roll the dice, you get 4 or more. You succeed, unless a colonial player disagrees. A native player disagrees. At which point, the dice roll is overruled, unless the colonizer disagrees, at which point their opinion is overruled. And it says something interesting about colonization, but also it says something interesting about D&D and about the games we play. Because you roll the dice, but also if the GM doesn't want you to do the thing, you're not doing the thing. You can't make it work. But we have this sort of pretendy back and forth, where I guess I'll have to let you do that or what have you. And it's like so much of the rules we see, the the rulesier you go, the more trust you can put in the system and the GM as the arbitrator of that system, and the more immersion which you can come out of it, which can arise from it. The deeper you can slot yourself into it. But I'm not sure necessarily that's what excites me. I'm not sure that's what I want to do. And what I want to do is tell a story with my friends and sit down and start spinning stories. I want to perform a bit. I want to entertain. I want to stand up and stomp around. I want to be the guy in charge for a bit. And I think that's where role-playing games have ended up for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's all fascinating. I think it's it just always fascinates me that we can talk about so many of these things just in the context of the hobby of role-playing games. We can talk about all of this stuff. You can talk about, singing. You can talk about acting. You can talk about doing voices. You can talk about, are we going rules heavy? Are we going rules light? Are we just making this up as we're sitting there? Like, and it's all contained within what we call tabletop role-playing games. I think that's fascinating. But now I'm going to let time, because this is all fascinating and I could actually go on, but I'm going to let time get away from me here. But I should ask about Honey Heist, because you're the designer of Honey Heist. Yes. And Honey Heist went big in the tabletop role-playing game scene, needless to say, because probably everybody listening to this podcast has heard of it or played it because it went so big. And so why don't you just tell us a little about Honey Heist, and how did that feel to have a game, being played in front of millions of people on YouTube or whatever, which eventually happened?
I was at a friend's house. We used to do these things called it was brewing and crafting was the thing. So you go over and drink either tea or gin, and you do whatever craft you'd liked. And so people would bring crochet or knitting or painting or what have you. But then invariably, because my friends are much smarter than me, they just do cryptic crosswords. And everyone would stop doing their crafts and they'd do a cryptic crossword together. And I haven't a clue how to solve the cryptic crosswords, and I felt like a right plum. But I'm sitting there feeling like a right plum, and I've got my big sheet of A3 paper, twice the size of letter, I suppose, for American listeners. And I'm writing down ideas and trying to come up with something. Back in 2016, and I was trying to write a game where your inventory is your scars, is your character sheet, is your history, and it was like really sort of like moody and in depth. And I had there's a bit written on the pad which says, screw this, can't I just write a game about bears or something? And I came up with the idea of Honey Heist, get in the van, brackets, that we have specially modified to drive without thumbs. We're going to undertake the greatest heist of our lives. And I started coming up with ideas for bears, and the idea of like, okay, you all play bears and you steal something is great because everyone knows what a bear looks like. Everyone has wanted to be a bear. They're one of the better mammals. They're powerful. They're funny. They're the shape of a friend. Everyone likes a bear. And so by combining it with mildly anti-authoritarian theft and also setting it in a convention hall where most people have been to some kind of convention, or they've been to an events hall, they've been to an event space, they can imagine the space. That worked somehow. That caught the imagination of Twitter way before Critical Role had it. It was the first thing I did which really picked up. I think I got up to, I don't know how many retweets. It's a long time ago, but it was the first thing I did which really got outside of my circle. And I think that part of that is because of the way that I stole mechanics from Lasers and Feelings and all out of bubblegum, and then just smush them together to make them slightly more approachable. And that means that your bear character has an arc rather than dying. It takes death completely off the table, and at no point during a game of Honey Heist have I had anyone be like, oh, we don't have hit points or anything. For some reason, the second you say, yeah, you're a bear, you're in a room full of people, what are they going to do? It's immediately, okay, cool, fine, I maul them. Great, it goes brilliantly. Like, people are very excited to get it. And I think it'd be about a couple of years after I released it, this woman got in touch with me and said, oh, I'm interested in running this game on stream. Do you have any advice? And I was like, oh, well, you know what, it's dead easy, really. My two pieces of advice are, if someone's wearing the same hat, they've worked together before, and try and have two of the bears related. There's nothing funnier than a divorced bear or a bear, like someone's useless bear half brother who you have to look after. And I sent it off to her, and I was like, "Oh, guess who she is?" I looked up, and it was Marisha Ray, who does Critical Role, and she wanted to play it on the stream. And I'd not really come up against Critical Role. I don't really like actual plays. I find them a bit boring, and that's nothing against the people there, but it's a bit like there's a famous line about people who tell you about their dreams, which is like, don't tell me about your dreams unless you were having sex or I was in them. And I think that's kind of where I end up with role-playing games. It's like, I'm not interested in hearing about about a series of pretend events which happened to some people who don't exist. And Critical Role is at the better end of this because they're all professionals. And I hadn't come up against it. I hadn't really understood what was going on. And they streamed it at 3 a.m. in the morning. I was at my uncle's funeral on the Isle of Mull, which is this podunk island off the west coast of Scotland. And I woke up at 3 a.m., rolled over in my hotel bed, I opened my laptop and turned it on, and they were saying all sorts of kind of things about, oh, well, of course, we're in the world of Exandria, or what have you. I was like, oh, no, I'm going back to sleep, I think. I don't think I'm going to do this. So I've still never seen any of them, because I don't understand the in-jokes. But everyone seems to have a great time with it. And Marisha has been, top-notch at making sure that people know who I am. And like, it is so easy and depressingly common to have fairly sizable. We'll say less so these days. People are getting it these days. But 2-3 years ago, large streamers would run a game and then not even show a picture of your name. Like, it would be completely like, oh, I guess we just found this in the ether. And the level of support that just a casual mention from them can make. It doesn't have to be an endorsement. Just to be like, hey, here's where to find the thing. And Marisha was absolutely instrumental in saying, hi, this is a game by Grant. Here's where you can get the game. Here's his Patreon. Go give him money. And that was responsible for partially for the success of the business of Roanoke and Deckard, because that meant that we had a significant income for me doing one-page games as an untested designer at that point. I think I'd done Paranoia, but it wasn't out yet. And so it was great. Marisha was great, and she seems like a good egg all round. I since wrote a game for them called A Familiar Problem. Chris and I wrote that, which is broadly themed around the same level of chaos, but the idea is you play magical familiars who are up to a mission while their players are off doing something else, and that has my two favorite spells. Which is Summon Hole, which is about 3 foot across and 4 foot deep, and Summon Horse, just a regular horse. But summon a regular horse, not a horse under your command. There's very few problems that summoning a horse can't solve or make worse. It's an exciting thing to happen having a horse arrive.
No, that's amazing, and it's. Just an unbelievable story. Almost it's just an interesting kind of study in how the internet and things can kind of take off if people, depending on how they have an audience and different things like that. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the things which like people will say, like, Grant, do you have any advice on how to get started in role-playing games? Do you have any advice how to make it as an indie game designer, what have you? And the first advice is you want to be incredibly lucky. I have been astonishingly lucky, and also I was born white. I'm straight. I'm a man. I'm cis. I'm able-bodied. I'm broadly sane these days. I have every advantage back behind me, and that's kind of why that I got ahead in role-playing games. At that and the luck, rather than any sort of talent. Yeah. Well, at least you got the sane one in there, or at least broadly sane. Yes. Well, that's the thing. I used to be very unwell mentally. Oh no! I was never. No, that's okay. I was never. I'm not upset about it. I was never hospitalized for anything. But I've struggled with depression for about as long as I've been role playing. I think weirdly about 20 years. But thankfully through the application of some moderately useful head drugs and just some brilliant therapy and moving to the countryside, I'm better now. And it's really strange because I'm better now and I've spent the last 20 years not being okay. So it can often get to 3 p.m. and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm depressed.
Oh, no.
I used to just lie on the floor for a while. So it's great.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I am glad you are better. But just it is, like I said, it's just fascinating to think how you can just put out something and it kind of takes on a life of its own. It's just fascinating to think about some of those things. You did kind of ask a question there, or you kind of posed one that I was thinking about asking, is if people are asking you how to become a game designer, is your only advice to get picked up by Critical Role, or do you have some other advice in there?
It's very helpful.
Yes, very helpful, I'm sure.
Be lucky is something, but I think honestly, the best advice I can give you is one, to establish a portfolio. Mm-hmm. And you can just publish that online now. It doesn't matter. You can set up an itch.io page, and if you're interested in getting work from people, set up a private Google Drive with the PDFs that you've written on it, and then when you're looking for work, send that around to people. Because as someone who's interested in hiring writers to do things, the first thing I need to see is if they can write, and if they can write in a particular way, if they have the idea, if they have the humor down, if they have a brisk game mechanic down, if they can communicate technical information in a proper way, but it's not too dry. It's a weird business. That portfolio is the most important thing that you'll have. Far more important than your cover letter, or what have you. Far more important than getting it on time, even. The other thing I can recommend is the practice of making a portfolio means that you will be able to throw a lot of spaghetti at the wall, I think is the American phrase. And I never quite understood that, because you can just eat it to see if it's cooked. I don't know why you have to throw it at the wall, but apparently if you throw spaghetti at a wall, it sticks if it's cooked, or it doesn't stick if it's cooked. What's the rule?
Yeah, it's something like that. Yes,
something along those lines. Yeah,
it gets
just eat your pasta.
Yeah, it gets abstracted a little bit, I think. But yes, it's supposedly throw it at the wall and it sticks. Yes.
I'm going to throw this at the wall and see what sticks. Yes, precisely. Yeah. Yes. That lets you generate effectively weight of fire, and that means that something might spark, something might grab the collective, and people go, "Oh, this is what I wanted." Mm-hmm. And every success I've had is because people have thought, "Oh, this is what I wanted." And sometimes I've thought really hard about how I can give people what they want, and other times, no, it just happened. Honey Heist was a complete surprise.
Yeah.
And the second advice I can give to people is it's heartbreaking, but to schmooze, to make friends, especially in America, to take part in playtest conventions, to go and hang out with designers and talk to them. I drink and I smoke cigarettes, and that means that I get access to a bunch of really exclusive drug-themed conversations, which teetotalers and people who don't smoke don't have. And that's hugely discriminatory. But I guess learn to like lemonade or something. I don't know. I don't know. But you have to exist as a person. Mm-hmm. And once you exist as a person to someone, then they might start hiring you for things. I am far more likely to hire someone who's come up and said hello, and we've had a chat, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this person seems like they've got their head screwed on, right? They know what they're talking about." And then, oh, it turns out they can write. Cool, okay, this is a person I want to work with. This person, I like this person. We'll do this. Mm-hmm. As opposed to someone who I've never heard of. Turns out they can be the best writer I've ever seen, but if I don't know what kind of person I like, because I am a human. Humans like other humans. People like people, and so if you can be a people to people and go and say hello and exist as a person, that will dramatically increase your chances of getting published. But really, yeah, it's the luck thing. Try and write something which Marisha Ray likes.
Well, I just want to take a second to thank you for some great advice. I've never heard anybody else say create a portfolio.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
yes, you just show people you can write.
I have asked many game designers on this podcast, and you're the first one who says create a portfolio in Google Docs and then send that to people. So
it's just practice more than anything else.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So, yeah, thank you for definitely sharing that out there. I know some people who are listening are probably getting busy on their portfolio right now. So just to follow up on that, so a portfolio would just be some examples of some games or some examples of some writing, what would you like to see if somebody sends you a portfolio? What would you like to see in there?
I'd love to see a class. If you can do a class for a game, even if I don't understand the game, I've never played the game before, doing a class shows me that you can, or a background, or whatever the equivalent is, or a school of magic, or what have you, but something which shows me that you can use mechanics to build background, that you can take the background of a setting and imbue that into the unique. It shows me you can embed that into the unique thing that games have, which is mechanics and an interactive thing. And so rather than giving me 600 words about the carrion priest of the Moorsham, you can say, here's what happens when you eat someone. And that means that it is something a player can do. It is something which can happen at the table rather than something which the GM has to read, internalize, and reproduce. I think we're fairly guilty of doing that in Spire. We've got a lot of read, internalize, and reproduce, but I like to think we also put a lot of that in the classes as well. We give the players the opportunity to come up with things, and the GM the license as well to work with players to imagine things. And I've completely lost my thread of conversation. I said I was like, listen, Grant, you've got 3 seconds. We're going to bring it back in. If you just need to say and loudly.
Yeah. No, that's all right. No, I think that was very good what you were talking about there about the portfolio, because like I said, nobody's ever mentioned that before. So that's interesting.
Thank you. A class. Yes.
Yeah.
Show me you can use rules, and you can use rules to demonstrate fiction. That's the interesting thing.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I think that'll be very helpful for some people because,
good.
Yeah, because I get a lot of questions about, writing for games and stuff, and nobody seems to, there's no like career path, right? I've interviewed, more than 100 people on the podcast, and everybody got into game writing somewhere differently along the line, so there is no,
you don't study for this.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting though. Anybody out there listening, create a portfolio when you're going to be reaching out to game companies. And then, I mean, obviously the second part too is, when you said be a human, I mean, people like to, they want to work with people they know and stuff. And it's just, I mean, I think that's so important as well. It's just, just kind of got to be out there. So yeah, absolutely. But now, I don't want to take up too much of the time, before we're getting the time is kind of running away from us, which usually happens to me when I start talking about role-playing games, because, what are you working on now? What you mentioned Spire a couple times. What are what games are you working on? What do you want people to know about? Maybe I can ask a few questions about those.
Yeah, sure. So I've got 2 projects ongoing at the moment. I will say, because I'm 1/3 of Rowan Rick and Deckard. So we're a publishing house as well as a I like publishing house. That sounds quite exciting, doesn't it? We're a publishing house, and we publish books, and so we're just putting the finishing touches to the Die RPG, which is based on the comic of the same name by Kieran Gillen. And if you don't know who Kieran Gillen is, he's a comics writer from the UK. He's done a bunch of stuff for Marvel. He did Darth Vader. He did the Marnius Calgar comic. He wrote Phonogram and also Wicked and the Divine. He's very good, and he's a nice guy. And he approached us and asked us to publish his game, the game of his comic based on role-playing games, Die. And so we're about to finish that, but thankfully my role was as an editor and as a consultant, so I've not been involved in the production of that. And I've been given the opportunity to write things that I'm excited about, which I'm so happy for. And the 2 things I'm currently doing, there's one game which is about to enter a public playtest called Hollows. And Hollows is a game about, how do I put this? kicking in the back door to someone else's depression and killing it with swords.
Oh.
It's like Silent Hill crossed with Monster Hunter, crossed with Bloodborne, crossed with Jacob's Ladder. And you play these nightmarish. You play these hunters, and the people who've had this great tragedy in their lives. And the deal is that where there's badness, where there's tragedy, where there's evil, for the want of a better word, magic builds up and curdles around it and forms a hollow, which is a kind of this sort of like a dimensional pocket of bad cancer, as it were, in the world. And you play these hunters. And you had something horrible happen to you, but somehow you fought it off. But now you have the ability to go into these other world and murder the embodiments of this toxicity to cleanse the landscape around it. I have, as I mentioned, I've been dealing with depression for a lot of my life, and so all my previous games were about. I say all my previous games. A lot of my previous games were about dying, and dying in a way which mattered. And so Heart, the game which Chris and I put out most recently, Chris Taylor's my co-author on Hollows and most things. Heart is about a game about dying well and dying in a way which matters and which has an impact. And Goblin Quest is a game about dying 5 times a sitting. Spire is a game about dying after you're shot on the street by the secret police. It's the idea of being able to live through 1,000 deaths is something which fascinates me as someone who has been so obsessed with the idea of my own mortality for a long time. But in Hollows, you can't die. In Hollows, if you die, you wake back up again. And then you wake back up again with a metaphysical hangover and you increase in power. And then eventually, if you keep dying, you burst and become a hollow. So it's someone else's problem now. And I really think that the therapy's paid off, which is quite nice. But we've got it's a big sort of horror game. There's lots of really unpleasant things now which you can go and murder with swords and guns and shotguns. It has this really quite in-depth combat system, which isn't our usual thing that we do. But Chris is fascinated with that, and I'm interested in it from a mechanical point of view. And so we've come up with this with a system where we have a combat map, but it's focused entirely around the thing that you're murdering, and only reflects your position in relation to the monster. Mm-hmm. It's not a map of physical space in terms of like landscape. So we've got some really interesting experiments around that. We've got the idea that the weapons you're carrying are whispering to you, like in Disco Elysium, and whispering toxic masculinity into your ear. And a wide variety of interesting things, and really like grim, over the top, huge fights. That's Hollows. And that's about to go into playtest. When I'll give the links at the end of the show, when I give the plugs, you can sign up to the mailing list on our website. And you should do, because our mailing list will have all the details of when Hollows is going live and the playtest is going live. You can also sign up to the Hollows playtest. And I'm doing about fortnightly updates where I'm talking about the rules, the thoughts behind it, the development process, which I'm quite happy with and quite interested in. And you should do that. That's good. That's going to be our next big thing. And my next small thing is a game where you are a vampire Nazi hunter in World War II called Eat the Reich. And it's a one-shot game. And the deal is that as you drink Nazis of increasing rank and seniority, you grow in power. It's an apocalypse world game. I'm doing some private playtesting with that one, but we've got a really, really brilliant artist signed up to do it. Much like the way that we did a game called Orc Borg, which is like Morgborg, but with orcs. And we went 50-50 profits on that between us and the artist, Roland Kunz, who did that, and it produced such a beautiful book. It is absolutely like it's absurdly vibrant. It's hideous to look at, and I absolutely love it. It's loud. It's a loud book, and so we've got another deal with an artist I'm really interested in working with on Eat the Reich, and I'm hoping to make something similarly beautiful, if perhaps a bit less obnoxious. So those are my two things, and of course I'm doing one-page games. Yeah. I just put out a game called This One Time at Bard Camp, where you play. It's a teen sex comedy, but you all play bards. Mm-hmm. And I think it can. I'm fascinated by the system in that it's a uses playing cards and success is yes and yes but no and based on the suit of the card you draw. But your hand, as it were, your deck is built by every player around the table, so they all get to contribute a card. And I'm intrigued to see how that handles like oh, I'm going to be performing for the table, so they'll want me to succeed versus our characters aren't along the same line, so that they want my character to fail. I think it's a really interesting social thing in that which I want to play with. So I put that out today, and it'll be out for public release in a week, which I imagine will be after this podcast is released.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So well, go to my Twitter and you can find it. Twitter's still a thing by then.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see how it goes, huh?
We'll see. We'll see. Hopefully. I don't know. Who knows?
I rely on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, some amazing stuff there, Grant, that's all coming out. And we are... again, I've always let time get away from me. So where can people find all this stuff? I mean, you just kind of mentioned Twitter, but where can people find?
So, the easiest way to get access to my stuff is to go to Twitter. I'm at GSHOWITT, GS Howitt. The reason is because Twitter provides the greatest source of dopamine for me. So I will often just put unreleased things on there, or I will continually say, "Oh, I've done this cool thing." And people will say that it's good, and I feel happier about myself. You will have to sort of put up with the fact that I post a lot of pictures of toy soldiers, because that's the other thing I do. But you'll be fine. The games are worth it. If you don't want to put up with Twitter, or if you're indeed fleeing the hell site after they managed to make it worse somehow, you can come to rowanrickendeckard.com or rrdgames.com, which is easier to spell, and that will get you access to our full store, which has all of the games I've put out, aside from Uncle Grant's comedy role-playing RPG, which is not for public release. You can download all of them. Most of them are free because they're one page, or they pay what you want. You can get Spire and Heart, all of our stuff through there. It's a fully functional web store, and you can sign up to the newsletter, which I write, and which goes out once a month, and it always has a free game in it. So that's nice, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. All right. And I will be sure to put links in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who is listening right now, if you missed some of those links, you can head over there and check out Grant's website and his games. Well, Grant, it has been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you for having me.
All right, there you go, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Grant today. As I mentioned, you can check out links to his works in the show notes at dicegeeks.com. So head over there, check out those show notes. You will not regret it. All right, if you want something free, you can head over to dicegeeks.com/free. If you want to support the show in some way, which I would greatly, greatly appreciate, you can like, rate, review, and subscribe in your favorite podcast player or app. You can also support the show financially at patreon.com/dicegeeks. All right, now, guys, I thank you so much for listening, and until next Wednesday, keep gaming.